Hey guys, how you doing? We've had a busy week, so I'm a little late getting this episode out, but I promise it is a whatnot, and I hope you guys enjoy it. It is going to be about ghost towns. So let's get into it, shall we? We're going to start in Italy. I'm going to attempt to say these names. Krakow and Krakow, Italy was built on a steep summit for defensive purposes. It has been abandoned since the early 1980s um, due to faulty pipework that caused a landslide. So this town is sitting basically on top of a 1,300-foot cliff overlooking the Cavone River. It still has houses with chairs that are tipped over and old ovens and glass bottles that are still standing on the shelves, even though there have been multiple landslides and earthquakes. Uh, the streets are a labyrinth that spirals to the top of the outcrop where a Norman style castle from 1060 still watches over the town. There's still abandoned palaces, market plazas, abandoned churches, like I said, the homes. You have to wear a hard hat during the guided tour. And there are shots of this town in the movies The Passion of the Christ and Quantum of Solace. It is approximately 1.5 hour drive southwest of Bari International Airport. It's under an hour away from the Paleolithic era cave city of Sasse di Matera. I hope I said that right. I'm so sorry if I didn't. They've even found tombs that date all the way back to the 8th century BC. Under Frederick II, the town was an important military center. In 1656, the town was struck by the plague, which severely reduced the number of inhabitants. By 1815, the town was large enough to divide into two provinces. Between 1892 and 1922, 1,300 residents fled to the North American shores due to agricultural issues. Being on the side of a cliff, it would be harder to grow a lot of crops. So I could see how that would be a problem. In 1963, they began the evacuations due to a series of landslides that they believed were caused from water and sewer pipe issues. In 1972, there was a flood, and that would prevent repopulating the area. After an earthquake in 1980, the town was fully abandoned. In 2007, the descendants of the immigrants of Krakow in the United States formed the Krakow Society, a nonprofit organization which preserves the culture, traditions, and history of the town. And I saw the pictures of the town on Wikipedia, and it is gorgeous. is so pretty. Even now, there was a picture of the sun setting, and it was just amazing. Our next stop is a familiar town. We're going to travel to Pripyat, Ukraine. We've all heard of Chernobyl. Well, if you haven't, in northern Ukraine, near the border of Belarus, is a nuclear power plant named Chernobyl. The town Pripyat was founded in 1970, and by 1979, there was a population of 49,360 people. Before the incident of the power plant, there were no restrictions due to the Soviet Union deeming nuclear power stations safer than other power plants. The original plan was to build the plant about 16 miles or 25 kilometers from Kiev, but the Ukrainian Academy of Sciences, along with several other academies and well-wishers, stated safety concerns because they thought it was going to be too close to a city. So Pripyat was born along with the power plant about 62 miles or 100 kilometers from Kiev instead. After the nuclear power plant incident, everything within a 30-kilometer radius had to be evacuated. Residents were only allowed to take what they could carry, and it took 2 days after the disaster for the town to be fully evacuated. To this day, there are still concerns that are raised of whether or not it is safe to travel to Pripyat. Now, I'm on a Sam and Colby kick. And if you haven't watched Sam and Colby are a couple of guys in their 20s, and they're on YouTube. And they actually went to Pripyat, and they went to Chernobyl, and they met some people that lived there at the time of the incident. And one of the guys actually was explaining to them that it was not so cut and dry. So the way he explained it was a Saturday morning. He wasn't supposed to go to work, but he got a call that he needed to go into work. He was 25, I think. And he had a son who was under a year old. He had a wife. And he didn't know what was going on, but he knew he had to go to work, so he went. And his wife stayed home with their son. He worked at the plant. They didn't tell them what was going on for hours. The fire department, when they came, they didn't tell the fire department what was going on. They were fighting a fire without knowledge of what they were fighting. And so the first responders were going in blinded, basically. And then they would come out and they didn't understand why some of them couldn't breathe. Some of them, their skin was falling off, literally. Like it was it was so sad for him to talk about it and explain it. And the guy that was giving them the tour of the town, I think it was his grandfather, was one of the guys who cleaned up the town, quote unquote. And they didn't tell the cleanup crew what was going on. And they're out there cleaning everything off. And they didn't have any kind of hazmat suits. They didn't have masks. Nothing. They didn't tell them. So, yeah. It was not. When you look at it in history books and everything, it looks so cut and dry and so easy. And, oh, they evacuated them right away. No, they did not. Nobody knew about it until the noxious clouds ended up on Sweden's radar. And they started calling around to all the different power plants. And that was how they found out. So this greatly changed the way that we did nuclear power. And if you like watching things like that, it is a 4-part episode. Sam and Colby, YouTube. I highly recommend checking it out. There is some strong language. I will give you that. But other than that, it's very educational. That brings us to Kolmanskop, Namibia. And again, the pictures are so pretty of this place. It is half buried in the sands of the Namib Desert in Africa. It was first settled in 1908 as a German-style diamond mining town. It once had a ballroom, a bowling alley, a theater, an ice cream factory. They had fresh water shipped in by train. It had a hospital, a double-story mine manager's house. They also had the first X-ray machine in Africa, and they also had the first trolley in Africa. So it was a big deal. Now, they found out by accident that there were diamonds. They were cleaning the railroad, and as one of the guys was sweeping, he found a diamond. And then that created Kolmanskop. The homes are gorgeous. They're, like I said, it's all German style. They're beautiful, and they are almost still fully intact because of the sand and the heat. They're preserved. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. It has been completely abandoned since 1956. And it now operates as a tourist attraction. And when you buy tickets, you get the option of a guided or an unguided tour. And if you're heading to Namibia, I highly recommend it. And if you go, please send me pictures. I want to see. Like I said, it's amazing. Just in the pictures. Now we're going to travel to Kayaköy, Turkey. It's also known as Livisi and it is mostly uninhabited since 1923, after the Greek Orthodox residents were forced into exile as part of a population exchange negotiation at the end of the Greco-Turkish War. Many of Turkey's abandoned towns were repopulated by repatriated Muslims, while Livsi was deemed unsuitable for farming and abandoned to the elements. There is still a 17th century fountain, the churches, chapels, many of the homes. Part of the town has been restored into cafes and restaurants and hotels for tourism. The town was actually shown at the end of the 2014 movie The Water Diviner. As of 2022, there were only 975 residents. So a little backstory on this, because it's got a big backstory. And so I just hit the highlights. But in 1054 AD, the residents were mostly Greek Orthodox Christian, and they spoke Greek, but their Muslim Ottoman rulers spoke Turkish. And at that time, they lived pretty peaceful lives together until the Greco-Turkish War of 1919 through 1922. After the massacres of the Greeks and other Christian minorities during World War I, the town was almost completely depopulated of its 6,500 Greek inhabitants by 1918. The former inhabitants saw their properties completely stripped away from them as they became refugees, or they died in Ottoman forced labor camps. In 1923, the Treaty of Lausanne was implemented, which permanently barred the return of any prior Greek Orthodox refugees to their homes in Turkey. And then it required the remaining Orthodox Christian citizens of Turkey to leave their homes in Greece. The treaty also required all Greek Muslim citizens to permanently leave Greece for Turkey. Most of the Turks, Muslims from Greece were used by Turkey to settle the empty Greek Christian towns, while the Turks and Muslims from Greece did not want to settle in Livsi due to rumors of ghosts of the Greeks that were killed there. So now the town is preserved as a museum village, which I thought was fascinating, and is used for tourism. They've also found Lycianian-style tombs in the village. And what remains was built in the 18th century. Many of the buildings in the town were damaged in the 1957 earthquake of 5th, I think. I hope I said that right. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to learn other languages. It's just not working too well. So we are going to stay overseas for one more. It's not a big one, but it is Toshima Island in Japan. It's also known as Battleship Island. This island was purchased in 1890 by Mitsubishi and was developed as a seabed coal mining facility. By 1959, it was one of the most densely populated places on Earth, with more than 5,250 residents. It has been abandoned since 1974. It was granted UNESCO World Heritage status on the promise that authorities would acknowledge the use of forced labor from Chinese POWs and Korean citizens. Instead, there was a museum built claiming the opposite. Now, since they did that, UNESCO's been investigating, and they have started to change some of the exhibits in the museum over to acknowledge that there was forced labor. But they have to submit more paperwork and things like that by the end of this year, 2024, to continue the status. But much of the island itself is, and this includes the huge seawall, it's in danger of collapse. And I read something that said that you can only take a tour, basically virtually. And then I read something else that said, no, they've started to open it up to civilians again. So I'm not really sure exactly how you would take a tour. But if you were to go, be very careful because it is a mine. So it would be very dangerous, and there is a chance you would fall through. That being said, that's really all the information I could find. Now we're going to go to Mexico, to the island of the dolls. Now, legend has it, Don Julian Santana Barrera hung the dolls to appease the spirit of a young girl who drowned in the lake. It's located south of Mexico City, and Barrera began to collect the dolls and hang them around the island in the mid-20th century. After his death in 2001, his family opened the island up for to the public as a tourist attraction. So the legend has it that Barrera either came across the body of a young girl floating in the canals, or he failed to save the girl from drowning. The following day, he found a doll drifting down the canal. He believed that doll belonged to the girl, so he hung it in a tree in memory of her and as a talisman to ward off evil spirits. It is speculated the young girl haunted the island, and to appease her, he began trading produce for the dolls. There has yet to be any evidence that the girl actually existed. In 2001, his nephew came to the island to help him out, and while they were fishing the canal, Barrera, who was 80 years old, sang a song of mermaids in the water calling for him. The nephew stepped away briefly, but when he returned, his uncle was face down and lifeless in the canal, in the exact same spot that the girl supposedly drowned in. Since the island was opened to the public, there have been reports of the dolls moving their heads and arms and opening their eyes. There are also claims of hearing whispers from the dolls. I could have sworn I saw ghost hunters go to this island. I could be wrong, but I really thought I saw that. I know that Ghost Adventures went, but I thought Ghost Hunters went as well. I'm not entirely sure. But there are hundreds of dolls. Hundreds. So that brings us to our final place, and that is Centralia, Pennsylvania. In 1793, Robert Morris, who was a Revolutionary War hero, and he also signed the Declaration of Independence. Beneath Centralia. In 1962, the fire ignited from an unknown cause within the coal deposits below. The town was evacuated due to harmful gases being emitted. Only a few residents chose to stay, which made it a real-life urban legend. The population went from 1,000 people in 1980 to 5 by 2020. The fire has been burning beneath the town since 1962.
All real estate was claimed under eminent domain in 1992 and condemned by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The area itself is still active with open pit and strip mining. Apparently, no one was really concerned about the fires until 1979, when Mayor and gas station owner John Coddington inserted a dipstick into one of his underground tanks to check the fuel level. When he pulled out the dipstick, it was so hot that he lowered a thermometer into the tank. When he pulled the thermometer out, the tank was measuring at 172 degrees Fahrenheit. This increased the statewide attention to the fire. On Valentine's Day, 1981, 12-year-old Todd Domboski fell into a sinkhole measuring 4 feet wide and 150 feet deep. The hole suddenly opened under his feet in his grandmother's backyard. Todd was able to save himself by grabbing a tree root. His 14-year-old cousin, Eric Wolfgang, pulled him to safety. The plume of hot steam billowing from the hole was tested and found to contain a lethal level of carbon monoxide. At the time of the collapse, U.S. Representative James Nelligan and Governor Dick Thornburgh were visiting the town to assess it. The town was divided in their belief of how much of a threat the fires really were. But in 1983, the U.S. Congress allocated more than $42 million for relocation efforts. Nearly all of the residents accepted the government's buyout, with over 1,000 moving out of the town and nearly 500 structures being demolished. By 1990, only 63 residents would remain. By 2010, only 5 homes remained. On October 29, 2013, the then remaining 7 residents reached an agreement allowing them to remain in Centralia until their deaths, after which the rights of their homes will be taken through eminent domain. Now, eminent domain basically just means the state is taking the deeds to the home so that no one can try to purchase them or even go in there. The Centralia mine fire extended beneath the village of Burnsville, which is south of Centralia. This would require for that village to also be abandoned. The underground fire is expected to burn for another 250 years. That's crazy to me. And if it spread to another town nearby, who's to say it's not going to continue to spread? Obviously, wouldn't it have to? It's got to go somewhere. It raises a lot of questions. But that is our whatnot for this week. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was fun to research all of this. I will be back next week with another episode to go with our first in each state serial killers. Until next time, stay true and whatnot. Later, guys.